I smiled the night I lost everything. Not because I was okay, but because in that exact moment, I understood something no one else in that room did. They thought I had just been humiliated. They thought I had been reduced to nothing. But what they didn't know was that I had just inherited the most dangerous advantage of all. Silence. And while they laughed, judged, and turned their backs on me, I started paying attention. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge doesn't begin with anger. It begins with patience. And by the time they realized who I really was, it was already too late. If you enjoy stories where intelligence wins over arrogance, subscribe now, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Because this story, it's going to stay with you. I built my life around quiet sacrifices. At 34, people described me with words that sounded kind, but weren't. Supportive. Easygoing. Labels that erased everything I actually was. My mornings started before sunrise, packing lunches for my 2 kids, making sure every detail of the house ran smoothly. I also helped my husband grow his business, organizing his work, reviewing documents, preparing him for meetings. None of it had my name on it. And that was intentional, at least at first. I didn't need applause. I valued stability. A home where my children felt safe. A marriage that once felt like a partnership. But that had changed. He stopped looking at me like an equal. And started treating me like I was replaceable. I didn't argue. I didn't react. I watched. Because I learned something from my father. People show their true nature when they think you're not paying attention. And I was always paying attention. Especially now, when something felt like it was quietly falling apart. The real question was, how much longer until he showed me exactly who he had become? My husband didn't change overnight. It happened slowly, in the way he stopped asking for my opinion, then stopped listening altogether. At first, it was subtle. He'd interrupt me mid-sentence. Correct me in front of others. Laugh, just a little too long, when I said something he didn't find impressive. Then came the comparisons. Other wives. Other women. Always more ambitious, more useful, more aligned with the image he was building. Because to him, value had a price tag. And I didn't seem expensive anymore. The more his business grew, the more distant he became. Success didn't just elevate him, it reshaped him. Or maybe, revealed him. At family gatherings, he spoke for me. Answered questions directed at me. Reduced my presence to a role, mother, wife, background. And the worst part? No one questioned it. Not his family. Not mine. It was as if everyone silently agreed that I belonged exactly where he had placed me. Beneath him. I noticed everything. The tone. The timing. The patterns. Because disrespect isn't random. It escalates. And I could feel it building towards something bigger. The only thing I didn't know yet was how far he was willing to go. The first real sign didn't come with shouting. It came wrapped in a joke. We were at a small family lunch. Nothing formal. Just enough people for comments to feel casual, and damage to go unnoticed. Someone asked about the inheritance my father had just passed. Before I could answer, my husband smirked. Well, he said, raising his glass slightly, let's just say she didn't exactly win the lottery. A few quiet laughs followed. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I understood what he was doing. Testing. Measuring how far he could go without resistance. I kept my voice calm when I finally spoke. My father made his choices carefully. He shrugged, dismissive. I'm sure he did. The conversation moved on, but something stayed behind. A shift. Small, but undeniable. Because that wasn't just a joke. It was the beginning of a narrative. One where I was already losing, before anyone even knew the full story. And the unsettling part? He seemed very comfortable telling it. Which made me wonder, What else had he already decided about me without saying it out loud? The dinner was supposed to be formal. A celebration. My father's will had just been read, and the entire family gathered to process it together. That's what they called it. But it didn't feel like mourning. It felt like evaluation. My sister sat across from me, glowing as she casually mentioned the luxury apartments she inherited. Her husband reinforced every detail, making sure no one missed how valuable they were. Then all eyes turned to me. "And you?" someone asked. I answered simply. "An old motel." Silence, then laughter. Not loud. Not explosive. Just enough. My husband didn't laugh right away. He waited. Then leaned back and said, clearly enough for everyone to hear. "So she got the scraps." More laughter. My sister smiled. And then he looked straight at me and said it. "You're useless with things like this. Of course you'd end up with garbage." No one defended me. No one corrected him. I felt every pair of eyes measuring me, agreeing without saying a word. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just sat there. And let them believe that moment defined me. Because something inside me had already gone quiet. And when I finally looked up at him again, I wasn't hurt anymore. I was paying attention. The real question was, had he just crossed a line he wouldn't be able to come back from? It didn't happen days later. It happened that same night. The moment we got home, the silence felt heavier than anything said at that table. I put the kids to bed like nothing had happened, kissed their foreheads, and closed the door softly. When I turned around, he was already waiting. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said flatly. I didn't respond. He continued, pacing slowly. "I can't build a future with someone who brings nothing to the table. Nothing. After everything I had done." Then came the sentence that changed everything. "I think you should leave. Take the kids. Figure something out." No hesitation. No emotion. Just disposal. I looked at him, really looked this time. And realized something I had been avoiding. This wasn't anger. It was calculation. He had already removed me from his future. So I nodded. Quietly. Because arguing would only give him power. And I was done giving him anything for free. But as I packed that night, one question stayed with me. Why did it feel like he believed I would never recover from this? The motel smelled like dust and forgotten time. That's where I took my children. Not because it was ideal, but because it was mine. Broken neon lights flickered outside. The paint was peeling. Half the rooms were unusable. It looked exactly like everyone had described it. Worthless. The kids tried to be brave. I could see it in the way they didn't complain, didn't ask questions. That hurt more than anything. That night, after they fell asleep in one of the few clean rooms, I sat alone in the dark. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel it. The humiliation. The rejection. The weight of being discarded like I meant nothing. But I didn't cry for long. Because pain can either consume you or sharpen you. I remembered my father's voice, calm and precise. Not everything valuable looks valuable at first. I stood up. Looked around that abandoned place again. And this time, I didn't see failure. I saw something unfinished. Something hidden. The question wasn't whether this place had value. The question was, what exactly had my father seen that no one else had? I didn't wake up stronger the next day. I woke up quieter. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from clarity. I made breakfast for my kids using what little we had, smiling just enough so they wouldn't see the shift in me. But inside, something had already locked into place. I wasn't going back. Not to him. Not to who I used to be. Anger would have been easier. louder, immediate. But anger is messy. And I needed precision. So I made a decision I never said out loud. I would understand everything before making a single move. Every document. Every detail my father left behind. Every assumption people had made about me. I would let them keep believing I was lost. Because invisibility is a kind of freedom. Later that afternoon, I found a locked drawer behind the motel's old reception desk. No key. No label. Just forgotten. I ran my fingers across the wood slowly. And felt it. This wasn't random. My father didn't leave things unfinished. Which meant whatever was inside that drawer was meant for me to find. While I was learning the silence of that place, he was getting louder. Messages started coming in. Not from concern, but from control. At least come back until you figure things out. You're not thinking clearly. You can't raise 2 kids in a place like that. Each message carried the same message underneath. You failed. I didn't respond. Not once. But I read everything. Even the ones he didn't send to me. Through mutual contacts, through careless conversations, through the way people talk when they think you're already irrelevant. I learned his version of the story. I was unstable. Emotional. Incapable of managing anything of value. And he was the man who tried to hold everything together. He wasn't just moving on. He was rewriting me. And the more I stayed silent, the more convincing his story became. Which was exactly what I wanted. Because the more confident he felt, the less careful he would be. And the truth about arrogant people? They don't hide their weaknesses. They expose them, slowly. The question was, how much was he about to reveal without realizing it? I stopped reacting completely. Not out of weakness, but strategy. Every morning, I walked the motel grounds with a notebook, observing everything my father left behind in silence. Broken structures, old maintenance records, faded property maps hidden in drawers no one bothered to open. Patterns started to appear. Lines that didn't make sense for a worthless property. Meanwhile, I watched him from a distance. His confidence had grown. He was louder in meetings, more affectionate in public, almost proud of how easily he had moved on. But I noticed the cracks. He repeated himself too often. Over-explained things no one questioned. Needed constant validation. Insecurity dressed as control. And then I saw it. A real estate developer visiting the area near the old motel district. He didn't notice me. But I noticed him. Because the way he looked at that land wasn't casual. It was calculated. And for the first time, I felt it. My father hadn't left me a ruin. He had left me a question. And I was finally starting to read it correctly. I didn't tell anyone what I found. Not my children. Not a lawyer. Not even myself out loud. I just acted. Late at night, when the motel was quiet and the world felt suspended, I returned to the old reception desk. The locked drawer still resisted me, until I noticed something I had missed before. A thin engraving under the wood. A sequence. Not random. Intentional. It matched the numbering system from my father's old construction company files. My hands went cold. That wasn't coincidence. That was access. I used the pattern I remembered from years ago, dates, project codes, financial identifiers he used like a private language. The lock clicked. Inside the drawer, a folder sealed in plastic, untouched by time. No title. Just one line written in his handwriting. For the one who doesn't rush. I opened it slowly. And the first page made my breath stop. Legal land documents, and infrastructure plans I had never seen before. The motel wasn't isolated. It was positioned directly in the path of something much bigger. And suddenly, Everything I had been told about worthless land started to collapse. I didn't sleep that night. The documents were real. Official seals. Government-linked infrastructure maps. My father's notes weren't emotional, they were surgical. Every line pointed to one conclusion: the entire area around the motel was scheduled for major development. A highway expansion. A commercial corridor. And my property sat exactly in the critical access zone. The next morning, I noticed something I hadn't before. A black car parked across the street. Not random. It stayed too long. I didn't confront it. I just memorized it. By afternoon, I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. A calm voice introduced himself as part of a development firm. They asked if I was the current holder of the property. They already knew. Which meant someone had started moving around me. And then came the line that changed everything. We've been trying to locate the rightful owner for weeks. Weeks. Before I had even understood what I owned. I hung up slowly. Because now I knew. I wasn't discovering value. I was standing in the middle of a negotiation I hadn't been invited to, yet. That night, I made a choice that would have looked like surrender to anyone watching. I stopped searching. Stopped calling. Stopped reacting to the developer's attempts to reach me. Instead, I began organizing everything quietly: documents, maps, timestamps, every piece of proof my father left behind. Not to rush a sale, but to understand leverage. Because now I knew the truth. This wasn't just land. It was timing. And timing belongs to those who can wait longer than everyone else. Meanwhile, pressure grew from the outside. My husband's voice came back through indirect channels: friends, family, messages disguised as concern. You should accept reality. You're drowning in something you don't understand. He assumed I was struggling. He assumed silence meant defeat. But silence, for me, was structure. Every assumption they made became something I could use. That's when I did something no one expected. I refused the first official offer without explanation. Not out of emotion. But because I was no longer reacting to their game. I was preparing to change it entirely. And for the first time, I let them wonder what I knew that they didn't. I didn't respond to the silence anymore. I built on it. Every offer that came in was redirected through a lawyer I quietly hired, careful, methodical, invisible in all the ways that mattered. I never showed urgency. Never showed fear. That alone changed the way they spoke to me. The developer increased their offer. Then increased it again. But I already understood something they didn't. They weren't negotiating with a desperate woman. They were negotiating with someone holding timing they couldn't control. At the same time, I let a single piece of information slip through a mutual contact, just enough for my husband to hear that serious investors were now focused on my property. Exactly as expected. His reaction came fast. Too fast. He started asking questions about ownership structures, legal possibilities, even suggesting I let him help manage it. That was the moment everything clicked into place. They weren't separate forces. They were converging. And I had positioned myself exactly where both would have to come to me. I called the meeting. Not with my husband. Not with my sister. With everyone. Lawyers. The development firm. A notary. And, unknowingly to them, my entire family. The room was tense before I even spoke. I placed the folder on the table. My father's documents, I said calmly. Including the original infrastructure agreement. The developer opened it first. His expression changed immediately. He turned the pages faster. Then stopped. This land sits on the primary expansion axis, he said. It's not optional acquisition. It's essential. Then I showed the sealed clause my father left. Any sale required direct consultation with the sole heir and me, and could not be bypassed. My sister froze. That can't be real. My husband laughed nervously. This is just paperwork. But the developer shook his head. No. This changes everything. Then I looked at my husband. And finally spoke the truth he never expected. You called it worthless. But you never read it. His face drained as he realized. The motel wasn't trash. It was control over a multi-million expansion. And I had been the only one holding it from the start. No one spoke after that. Because there was nothing left to misunderstand. The silence in that room didn't break immediately. It collapsed. My husband was the first to try to recover, forcing a laugh that didn't land. You're exaggerating this. You always do this, turn nothing into something. But there was nothing left to hide behind. The developer closed the folder slowly and spoke with certainty. This property is part of the official expansion corridor. We've already allocated funding. What she holds is not just land, it's the key access point. My sister's expression shifted for the first time. Not superiority anymore, but disbelief trying to become calculation. So, the motel, she whispered. I answered before she could finish. Is the central piece. My father's notes were then read aloud by the notary, line by line, leaving no ambiguity. He had acquired the property years before the public project announcement. He had structured ownership under my name specifically. And he had marked me, not my sister, as the one who would receive it. Not because I was favored. But because I was patient enough to see what others rushed past. My husband stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You can't just. You already did, I interrupted softly. He stopped. Because for the first time, there was no space left for him to dominate the room. The developer turned to me directly. We are prepared to make a full acquisition offer immediately. Or, if you prefer, a long-term partnership with revenue participation. I looked at the papers. Then at my children sitting quietly beside me, watching everything without fully understanding yet. And I made my decision. I won't sell it completely, I said. I will keep equity. And I will be part of every development decision. The developer nodded. Agreed. No hesitation. No negotiation battle left to fight. Just recognition. My sister leaned back, stunned. Her luxury apartments suddenly felt smaller, not in size, but in meaning. She said nothing, but her silence carried something new. Loss, dressed as realization. My husband stepped closer, lowering his voice now. No arrogance left. Only urgency. We can fix this. We're a family. Don't do this to us. I looked at him for a long moment. Not with anger. Not with pain. But with clarity. You already decided what I was worth, I said. I'm just respecting your evaluation. He froze. Because there was no argument left that could reverse time. That night, I signed the agreement. The motel was no longer a motel. It became the foundation of a major commercial corridor project, offices, transport access, retail development. The old, worthless property was officially recognized as one of the most strategic land positions in the entire expansion. My financial future changed in one signature. But something else ended more quietly. My marriage. I filed for divorce a week later. He tried once to talk to me again. Then again through messages. Then through silence filled with regret. But by then, I had already stepped out of the version of my life where I was small enough to be dismissed. I didn't respond. Not because I was hurt. But because I was done participating in a story where I was underestimated. My sister never apologized. She didn't need to. Her inheritance didn't disappear, but it lost its superiority in her eyes. And that was enough. She stopped comparing. That was her consequence. And me? I didn't celebrate loudly. I rebuilt quietly. The motel grounds became the center of a growing development project. I attended meetings, signed decisions, learned the language of investors and planners, not as someone proving herself, but as someone who finally belonged at the table. My children stopped asking why we lived there. Because it stopped being there. It became home. One evening, months later, I stood outside watching construction begin. Steel rising where decay used to be. And I finally understood what my father had given me. It was never just property. It was time. A space where patience could become power. Where silence could outlast arrogance. And where being underestimated could be turned into irreversible advantage. My husband lost everything that mattered to him that day. Control. Status. The version of me he thought he owned. And I didn't destroy him. I simply stopped standing in the place where he expected me to stay. Before leaving, I wrote one sentence in my father's notebook and left it in the old reception desk drawer. I waited. And I saw everything. Then I closed it. And never looked back. Because the real ending wasn't his downfall. It was the moment I realized I was never meant to be small in anyone else's story again. If this story stayed with you, take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing what you would have done in her place. I read every comment, and I want to know where you're watching from and how this story made you feel.